Again, good afternoon. I'm Lisa Gieskes. Thank you for attending the SCLA Continuing Education Committee's webinar, Crafting Best Practices for Library Services. Our presenter is Maggie Mason-Smith, Access Services Librarian at PASCAL, which stands for the Partnership Among South Carolina Academic Libraries. Serving over 220,000 students at 57 colleges and universities, PASCAL is committed to providing timely and universal access to information resources and library services to all students, faculty, and staff in the South Carolina higher education community. PASCAL supports higher education in South Carolina through multiple programs, including a shared library services platform for 55 member libraries, statewide rapid print delivery service, and core electronic resources, including a robust shared ebook program. PASCAL also provides training and support to member libraries and seeks to foster greater collaboration with the South Carolina academic library community. Today's webinar is brought to you by the South Carolina Library Association's Continuing Education Committee. SCLA is South Carolina's premier library association. We are a group of librarians, library staff members, and library supporters working together to advocate for and improve library services in South Carolina. I'm going to hand it over to Maggie Mason-Smith.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Maggie. Thank you everybody for coming today.
Maggie, we can't hear you.
Is this any better?
No. Oh.
Is this any better?
I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure. Can you try saying something again?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
I don't know. Can everybody else hear? Yes. 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 Okay. Well, I'll let Maggie take it away.
Thanks. Yeah, okay. So I'm Maggie. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. Can everybody see that? Oh, Zoom took my chat away. Okay. So can everybody see my slides here? Yes, yes, okay. Like I said, my name is Maggie. Thank you for coming today. I'm the Access Services Librarian for the PASCAL Consortium. And today I'm going to talk to you about crafting best practices for library services. You might hear some background noise. I'm in Clemson, and with all the rain, my garage flooded into my living room. So my husband's taking a day off to try to get that settled. So you might hear some weirdness behind me. But Lisa has volunteered to monitor the chat. Please do ask any questions that you have. Feel free to pop in and interrupt me as I go if there's something that I should address in the moment. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn my camera off to center the focus on the slides and the content of the session. So here's our agenda for the day. I'm going to start by providing some background, both my own and a bit of background on PASCAL. And once you've got that context, I'll turn to crafting best practices. In this section of the session, I'll discuss how I've approached building best practices so far. From there, I'll move to applying the approach, where I'll take the approach from the previous section and use that to be building out a plan for an upcoming PASCAL project. And we'll wrap up with takeaways, and I hope leave plenty of time for questions at the end. So to begin, the background. As I said, my name is Maggie Mason Smith. I have worked in libraries since 2007 when I started as a student worker at Clemson University. After graduation, I took a full-time position at Clemson and I stayed there for the next about 11 years. The first 8 of those years were spent in circulation. And then in about 2018, I began splitting my time between circulation and resource sharing. In 2019, I moved to resource sharing full time, and I stayed there until I transitioned away from Clemson in 2021. I moved from Clemson to the PASCAL Consortium, where I am the first dedicated access services librarian. PASCAL, like Lisa said, is the partnership among South Carolina academic libraries. The consortium is governed by an 11-member board of directors, and we host a variety of topical teams made up of members from our participating libraries. The consortium is part of the South Carolina Commission on Higher Education, and we are supported by member fees as well as state funds. There are currently 57 member libraries that are part of the consortium. Of these, 35 are public institutions. This is comprised of technical, comprehensive, research, and special libraries, and the other 22 institutions are private. We support approximately 229,000 students across the state. This is our mission. We strive to provide timely and universal access to information resources and library services through creative use of technology, central licensing, and collaborative action in order to support a highly productive knowledge environment for students, faculty, and staff at every member institution of higher learning in South Carolina. PASCAL has 4 main program areas. These are content licensing, system support via a shared Alma Primo V platform, affordable learning, and my specific program area, which is rapid delivery. Our rapid delivery program is called PASCAL Delivers. It was implemented in 2008 via a reciprocal agreement between members to borrow and lend for free. The program offers access to more than 12 million physical items and includes 3 complementary services. These are Pick Up Anywhere, Visiting Patron, and Return Anywhere services. Pick Up Anywhere allows patrons to choose a location to pick their requests. This may be neither the patron's home institution nor the owning institution. Visiting Patron allows patrons to participate by visiting a library in person to browse and check out items. And I'm using the term participating library here because not all institutions are back to full service after COVID-19 closures. And Return Anywhere, which is what it sounds like. Patrons are able to return their items to any library in the consortium. In addition to our print delivery services, I am currently chairing a task force to develop an additional digital component. So as I've said, I've been at PASCAL a little over a year, and one of the changes that I've made is to begin developing best practice documentation. So far, I've done this for PASCAL Delivers Print as well as PASCAL Delivers Digital, both for article and chapter lending services, which we are currently implementing, and for controlled digital lending services, which we are not currently offering consortially, but are supporting for members who wish to participate institutionally. I'm planning to develop best practices for whole ebook lending and considering potential areas that it may also benefit to have this type of documentation for as well. So a year into access services with 3 lists of best practices down, at least 1 more to go, and others needed for upcoming projects, I've learned some things. First, each institution is different, and this includes branches at the same institution. Because each library is different, not every library will reach the goal in the same way, and that is okay. Best practices are built upon assumed knowledge. This means that best practices alone are not enough. We need to build from the foundation up to ensure we meet everybody where we are. And this means that we need a file of documentation that includes a list of best practices in addition to other necessary information. And that documentation is always living. There's no such thing as a final draft, but this doesn't have to be intimidating. I'm going to elaborate on each of these lessons as we move to the rest of this session. So next is crafting best practices. So I've broken down my best practice process into 4 steps, which you can see here. First, investigate the need. Second, create documentation. Third, communicate that information out with the appropriate people. And fourth, assess and update the process as needed. In the remainder of this part of the session, I'm going to use these steps to outline how I build best practices for the PASCAL Delivers service. So again, this is kind of what I've done to build the best practices that I've already created. So first, investigate the need. As I mentioned previously, best practices are built on an assumed level of knowledge. So just drafting best practices and providing them to the appropriate library employees is not enough. It's important to assure that the foundational knowledge is really there. So in other words, we need to meet people where they are and then build up together. To do that, we need to truly understand where people are and what they need. So for PASCAL Delivers, I began my investigation with a 3-pronged approach. I began claiming and working on any support requests that came through that was related to PASCAL Delivers. Our members have a form that they can fill out, so when they have an issue, they'll fill that form out and it will come to a LibAnswers queue, and we can work from there. And it's important to note that I did this with the help of my colleague who took on PASCAL Delivers before I was hired. So she kind of had some background to help me work up as I went. Next, I met with members individually to learn more about how they view the PASCAL Delivers service and how they market that service to their patrons. And I held discussions with PASCAL's Access Services and Resource Sharing Working Group. That's the group that PASCAL Delivers as a service kind of falls under, and I'm the liaison for that group. As I did this, I learned some things, right? Library employees managing PASCAL Delivers for their institution often had little to no training, especially if they took on the role for someone else that had since left their institution. PASCAL Delivers was frequently separated from outside interlibrary loan services. So the employees working with the service were not necessarily ILL specialists. And though concerns from members varied, there were specific worries that arose multiple times. So with this deeper understanding of the state of the service within the consortium, I could begin drafting updating, creating documentation to address needs. I started with a description of the service. I edited the current description that we had, drafted definitions for those complementary services I told you about, and linked to relevant service policies so that people could find everything they need kind of in one place. I then started working on workflows. The workflows that we had in place were great, but they were not comprehensive. So I developed a PASCAL Delivers manual to try to fully address all aspects of the service. Like I said before, documentation is always living, so I update that as necessary. And then I drafted some general courier information, created a semester-specific courier schedule, updated our consortial shipping standards, updated and created new courier labels and book straps, and updated instructions to request courier bags. Finally, with all of this in place, I could actually create a list of best practices to pull all of this together. So I wanted members to, I wanted our members to actively use the documentation, and large paragraphs of complicated language are not going to be usable for a fast-paced library environment. So to make the documentation usable, I, kept the description short, included screenshots with bold crumb trails in the workflows, and made the workflows searchable. I formatted the key sentences of the best practices in bold, added links everywhere, repeated information in multiple places as necessary, and used a consistent format throughout. And finally, I vetted all documentation with the help of multiple parties. It's important to point out here that when doing this, at least one person vetting the documentation always had no direct work or contact with the service. This was to make sure that somebody who literally did not know what was happening could follow the instructions if they needed to. With that documentation created, I needed to communicate that information out with our library members. PASCAL supports a variety of methods of communication. We host a website, we maintain multiple Basecamp discussion boards, we send out a bi-monthly newsletter, we use that LibAnswers ticketing system I talked about, we set up meetings via Zoom, and we communicate via email and phone. When communicating information to members, it's important to consider different styles of learning. So I try to use each of these methods in some way. So for example, all documentation is posted to our website. Updates are posted to Basecamp when documentation is added or updated. General updates are included in our newsletter. I point back to documentation, and PASCAL delivers related tickets when I can, and members are always encouraged to meet with me via Zoom or contact me through email or over the phone. The most frequently used method of communication is our website. And one key factor of communication via a website is organization. The PASCAL website has a specific section for PASCAL Delivers, and this is where I upload all of our documentation. I've reorganized this section over the last year as information has been added. You can see here on the right, the tabs in this section of the website. That's a lot of information. So I specifically try to sort by need. So here you can see PASCAL Delivers Print is at the top of the page, since that's our original aspect of the service, and all members currently participate in it. Underneath that is PASCAL Delivers Digital, which is the developing aspect of our service that not all members currently use. I group related content together. So for example, you can see a box for PASCAL Delivers Print with 2 tabs nested underneath, one of those for workflows and then one for courier information. I do repeat information in multiple places. This is a little outside of this specific example, but you can see tabs for copyright resources and licensing information nested under that PASCAL Delivers tab. Both of those have been copied over to our e-resources section of the PASCAL website as well. And I link to other relevant pages. So for example, that top PASCAL Delivers tab, which provides a broad overview of the service, links out to both the PASCAL Delivers Print tab as well as the PASCAL Delivers Digital tab. My main goal is that anyone can navigate anywhere from anywhere they are, which is a little hard to do sometimes. This organization method carries over to the information within the tabs. Like I said, this is a screenshot of the PASCAL Delivers Print workflow tab that you saw before. And you can see here that there are tabbed boxes on the page that allow members to quickly navigate between the relevant sections rather than having to scroll forever. And we're going to talk a little bit about these specific best practices in a few slides. So the last step in this process is to assess and update as needed. To effectively do this, I sort of move between steps 1, 2, and 3 continually. I actively meet with members, listen to their concerns, and develop a plan to address them if possible. I also meet with PASCAL's Access Services and Resource Sharing Working Group every other week. I've said I consider all documents to be living. I regularly evaluate documentation for clarity, accessibility, thoroughness, and solicit feedback from our members. I update the documentation regularly and add new documentation as needed. And then finally, I never stop communicating with our members. So on this slide and the next few, you'll see the actual best practices list for PASCAL Delivers Print. And as you can see, these bullet points tie together some of the things that we have discussed so far. The first sentence of each number is in bold. The bold sentence summarizes the point, and the description follows that. This allows members to focus quickly on the topic of the bullet point and then continue on if it's relevant to their current need. Numbers 1 and 2 direct members to use the shared Alma Primo platform to make requests. You can see this doesn't tell them how to make those requests or how to use the platform. That documentation is in another piece of the overall file. These 2 points remind members just why we ask them to do this. Here are numbers 3 and 4. These 2 address concerns that were common when I was meeting with members. These are really reminders of the agreement made between libraries and the promise of service to patrons. In each of these numbers, you can see links. There's a link to current ILL practices. There's a link to our consortial shipping standards document and a link to the PASCAL Delivers Contacts tab of the website. And number 6 reminds members of the linchpin of the service and directs them to PASCAL staff in the event of a lost or damaged item. And the last 2 numbers here also stress a key component of the PASCAL Delivers service as a whole, and that's communication. I encourage our libraries to work together to serve their patrons, to troubleshoot, and then to pull me in as needed via a link to that support request form. So in this next section, I'm going to outline how I can use the approach that I just laid out for PASCAL Delivers to an upcoming PASCAL project. So we are all aware of the recent increase in book challenges and book bans. PASCAL staff know that it's only a matter of time before academic libraries begin to experience what K-12 and public libraries are going through now. And we would like to help our members prepare for this. Part of our process will include crafting best practices for book challenges, which, as we've discussed, is not enough on its own. So I'll break down a potential process for this project here. So first, we'll need to create a tentative plan. We know we need to assess the needs of our members, determine how feedback will be collected from our members, consider multiple methods of communicating back to our members, and create a timeline factoring in assessment and updates. So for our book challenge project, we have been internally investigating the methods of public and K-12 libraries. And we've been holding discussions with relevant PASCAL teams, such as the Access Services and Resource Sharing Working Group and our EDI committee. And we plan to create a home for the information that we create on the PASCAL website, and then host a webinar for our membership next spring. With a webinar plan for spring, we need to start immediately. So with that in place, the next step is to develop documentation. And this is a multi-part process. We want to build from the foundation up, and that means having a common understanding of the language we use to discuss book challenges and book bans. So with this in mind, we'll start with the very basics, which are definitions. For this project, we'll provide definitions for relevant terms, such as censorship, collection development, weeding, book challenges, book bans, intellectual freedom, and misinformation or disinformation. This may seem very, very foundational, but in the conversations that I've been seeing and following about book challenges and book bans, it's become very clear that there's not always agreement on what these terms mean, even within our profession. So even if our members don't exactly agree with the definitions we use, if they know what we mean when we say the word, we can all move forward together. So next, we'll turn to policies and procedures. Policies and procedures provide a roadmap for day-to-day operations and a plan for contingencies. In our current climate, libraries must not only have policies and procedures in place to handle a book challenge, but they have to be up to date. So for this project, we're planning to create sample collection development and weeding policies that our members can use as a guide for their own. We're going to create sample book challenge forms that our members can use as a guide. And we're going to create a draft charge for a book challenge review committee that our members can use as well. We're also thinking of creating a list of tips for reference interviews that outlines, information as a social phenomenon, confirmation bias, mis and disinformation, and addresses probing for context. With that in place, we're going to share out our resources. We'll do research ourselves to ensure that we create usable sample documentation and provide practical recommendations. So we can share links to those resources as well as links to organizations essential in aiding libraries who experience a book challenge. It's also important to include good news in these resources. So for this project, resources links may include the ones that you see here. ALA's Office of Intellectual Freedom, SCLA, the National Coalition Against Censorship, the Freedom to Read Foundation, Every Library, United Against Book Bans, and Book Riot. Book Riot might seem out of place here. I don't know if anyone follows Book Riot, but they do a really good job of tracking the challenges and the bans across the country right now. Actually, in one of the latest emails I got from them, there were, I think, 4 different snapshots of things happening in South Carolina right now. So with this foundation in the form of definitions, with sample policies, helpful resources, now we've reached a point where we can draft best practices recommendations to pull all of these things together and build a common knowledge base across the consortium. These best practices should refer back to the relevant documentation, boost confidence and efficiency, and lead to strong decision-making. So for this project, best practices may include the following: assess and update key policies, create a book challenge review committee, and develop a plan. So you can see here, these like before are in bold with a description of what it is out to the right. So for assessing and updating key policies, the description is review and revise collection development, weeding, and book challenge policies biannually, and post that publicly for accountability. And each of those kind of follows that. Here's some more potential best practices. Vet documentation by multiple parties, including at least one that does not have regular involvement in the process that's being documented. Offer regular training. Frontline employees, including student workers, need regular training to build those de-escalation skills and practice a book challenge workflow. Communicate with peers. We will either create a discussion board or maybe expand the scope of one of our discussion boards to give our members the ability to reach out to colleagues across the state all at once. And then to communicate with PASCAL staff. We're here for whatever our members need. So with that, right, we need to share this out with our members. There are multiple styles of learning, like I said, visual, oral, verbal, kinesthetic, and we want to make sure to accommodate each how we can. For this project, we're going to include updates in the PASCAL newsletter and at our general membership meetings. We're going to update the PASCAL website with all of our documentation. Like I said, we're going to broaden the focus of relevant Basecamp message boards to create a new board to encourage discussion and collaboration, and encourage our members to contact us via email or a support ticket. We've seen that book challenges typically target stories centered on BIPOC, LGBTQ+, immigrant, etc. Characters or stories written by authors in those communities. This attempt at erasure can lead to lasting trauma. So holding space for discussion and providing support is key. So for this project, we're going to offer to schedule sessions for libraries to discuss their specific environment, experiences, address questions, and collaborate to build potential strategies for them. We'll also offer to schedule meetings for individual library employees to discuss their specific concerns, experiences, and questions. And I'm just going to, pause a second to say that PASCAL is not staffed by therapists, but it is staffed by fellow librarians who recognize the importance of the profession to society as a whole, and who recognize the impact on mental health that challenges can have. So one constant in libraries is change. As book challenge methods and targets change, it's important for us to assess how we support members and update and reshare where needed. For this project, we'll assess by considering questions from and conversations with our membership. We'll assess by discussing the project with relevant PASCAL teams, and then we'll update our documentation and include new information and share that out with members once again. So I'm going to transition now to the final and shortest part of the session, which is takeaways. So in this final slide, I'm pulling together the session with a few key pieces. Best practices tie together a file of documentation. You should always develop the foundation first. Communicate in many different ways. Documentation is always living, so assess it and update it regularly. And best practices are the goal, but that goal may not be reached in the same way by each library in each situation. And that's it for me. I wanted to leave a lot of time if anyone had questions or wanted to have a dialogue about this. So I'm going to turn my camera back on, and I'm happy to talk about this if anybody has anything they want to discuss. Lisa, you started talking and then you were muted.
I'm really curious about your work, like modeling for the K through 12 community, because that's mostly that's like what we're hearing about. So I hope you could talk more about that.
So essentially, we're trying to watch what's already happening to know what's going to come to us, right? We're trying to watch how K-12 librarians and public librarians are addressing the challenges that they're receiving. And a lot of what we see, unfortunately, is, people leaving their position because there's nothing that they can do about it. We don't want that to happen in one of our institutions, especially since often there are student workers working the front desk, right? So if there's a challenge for one of our libraries and it comes to a student worker, that's an 18-year-old who might just look at the person and say, well, that's dumb. Like, why are you asking me this question? We don't want to escalate. So we've been watching what K-12 institutions are doing. We have more contacts within public libraries internally. So one of my plans is to reach out to somebody that I know, actually, Megan Palmer. I think she has more contacts within the K-12 environment than I do, to see if there's anything that's being discussed that we might be missing on, like a listserv that we're not on, or a different method of communication that we might not be seeing. But really, my plan is to really kind of dig into how people are already addressing this, so that we can take that and take it and copy catalog it for ourselves, essentially.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
I'm going to wait a few more seconds. It's going to be a little awkward.
Yeah, I want to make sure that if people have questions, they can ask.
Okay. So I know I ran through everything fast, but you can see my email address is here. I'm always happy to talk about things via email, jump on Zoom. I'm happy to talk about any of this or any other thing that I've talked about today, whether that's PASCAL Delivers or PASCAL as a consortium. I'm just happy to talk about it.
Your working group, can you talk to people about that, and like if people want to get involved?
So our working group is made up of members of the consortium. So what we do, we have a variety of teams. We have, access and resource sharing. We have systems. We have cataloging. We have EDI, common collections, a lot of different teams. And we put out a call for volunteers from our membership. And we usually have somewhere between like 7 and 9 people that are in a team. And then there's a PASCAL liaison for each of those teams. So I liaise with access services and resource sharing. And then I also liaise with our collaborative collection committee that's doing more collaborative collection work. That's why I named that. But I'm always happy to talk to anybody about the things that we're working on. So, for example, right now we're working on ways to market PASCAL delivers to our members. So we're working on some slides that members can use, things like that. But also we are working on some digitization troubleshooting. I mentioned digitization as a new aspect of the service. And when you have a new aspect of the service, things go sideways randomly. And we're working on some of those issues to try to figure out what exactly is happening in Alma Primo.
Are you taking new people now still, or volunteers?
We are not right now, but we will put out a new call for volunteers from membership in this coming summer. Assuming nobody randomly drops out of one of the teams between now and then. We do have to have like a minimum number, so sometimes we randomly have to put a call out. So actually, I think there might be a call going out for systems before the summer, but everything else will have a call in the summer.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for informing us and sharing your knowledge and expertise. I'm gonna let everybody know that Maggie Mason-Smith's contact info is on the screen there. And as you mentioned, they can find more on your website, right?
Yes, there's all kinds of things on the website. Some of it is behind a password, but a lot of it is just kind of front and center. So if you have questions about something and you don't see it, feel free to send me an email. I always share as much as I can share. We're all in the same profession, so.
Well, last call for questions. And again, thank you everyone for being here. And we look forward to more SCLA Continuing Education Committee webinars. So please check the listserv and also the website. And this will be posted to the SCLA YouTube channel. So we can make that available to people at any time. Well, thank you, Maggie.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed thinking this through. So I'm glad that you asked me about it, Lisa.
Thank you. Have a really great day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.